good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. We have a great webinar on tap, as always, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to access it later on. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for either of our speakers, please don't wait, don't hesitate, just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your questions, and we will try to get to as many as we can near the end of today's webinar. Also, at the end of today's webinar, we are going to be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our 4 lucky winners. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is shifting compliance and security left into the hands of developers. Our speakers today are Shiri Ivtsan, Senior Product Manager at WhiteSource, and Reza Alavi, who is Cybersecurity Risk Consultant at Wipro. Thank you both for joining me today. I am so excited about this webinar. And Shiri, I think you are going to be kicking us off. So I'm going to put myself on mute and take myself off camera and let you get right to it.
Thank you, Charlene. Thanks for the intro. Hi, Reza.
Hi.
So first of all, I apologize for my voice. It's not the best. But we have a very interesting webinar today. So as Charlene mentioned, we're talking about how to shift compliance and security left. We'll focus on what the developers need in order to actually take the responsibility and awareness for security. And with that, let's move on. So really what we're talking about is the shift from DevOps to DevSecops. As most of you know, the software world has shifted dramatically in the last 10 years. So from waterfall and releasing a version every 6 months or even every year, we're now deploying to production every like 30 seconds. And we feel that security is a little left behind. So in most organizations, and maybe you can relate to it, security is sort of slowing down the process of DevOps and the entire software pipeline. And what DevSecops is all about is making the security a part of development and making security part of DevOps. So this is what we're going to discuss. Maybe try and give you some tools on how to do it better. Reza, what do you think? Anything to add about that?
Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for that introduction. You were absolutely right. The whole purpose of DevSecOps for us is to make sure we are providing the right level of assurance to our organizations for an ever-changing and evolving compliance regime. So basically, DevSecOps is the natural consequences of, shortening the development lifecycle for us in order to drive visibility, collaboration, agility, as you mentioned, and of course, security into each phase of DevOps pipeline.
Yeah. So with that, we're sort of talking about traditional DevOps, even though DevOps is a new word in the software world. So we talk about the fact that security cannot really be the bottleneck at the end of the software lifecycle as it used to be before. And it needs to be integrated into each and every step of the software pipeline. So from coding to development to the actual release and also to the monitoring. So we need to be able to provide the right tools for developers and for security teams in order to actually integrate security in each and every step. So this is very different from what we see in traditional security. If we think about the traditional security model, we sort of think about some sort of security person or security teams that need to approve every component, every open source component, for example, that the developer brings into the code. And this is very different from the world of, automation and the agility, as you mentioned, of DevSecops. So these are my thoughts about the traditional DevOps cycle. Yeah.
Well, that's really spot on. Basically, as we know, as a result of pressure to rapidly move code from development into production, so there is no longer enough time for lengthy security review and testing processes. So therefore, we had to incorporate security into DevOps pipeline, and this is how DevSecops was born, and is the natural consequences of shortening that development life cycle, as I mentioned. But the goal of DevSecops is shifting security and incorporating into the development. But a successful DevSecops is not just about securing code, but also is about securing the flows of data through code, and also securing the methods we use and the tools in DevOps pipeline, as you were explaining. So that's a new environment for organizations, because it takes them from traditional monolithic running IT infrastructure into a microservices and into a completely different world where agility is an issue, and the requirements of how you react to your competitors. So it's a new world. It's just because the way we deal with technology, the way we deal with security, it needs to be reviewed, it needs to be changed.
Exactly. It almost feels like we've changed the IT world into this new world that you're describing, but security was sort of left behind. I mean, we shifted development first, and then we shifted the IT world, and now we're just starting to shift the security world. So this is really interesting. And then one of the questions that pops up immediately when speaking about all of this is, who is actually owning the application security within the organization? And I mean, is security really everyone's problem? And I guess it depends on the organization. But if 15 years ago, security was, only the CISO problem or only the security team's problem, today we sort of seeing the shift. So it just shifts to the entire company. So we can see here DevOps, we can see here developers and team leaders. And the question of who is owning security, I think, is maybe the hottest question in every security organization right now, these days.
Absolutely. I mean, the owner of not only application security, the owner of security in organizations is basically everyone. So, I mean, these days, application security is a top priority for organizations for obvious reasons. But the task itself is becoming more challenging and complex as continuous release is rising and more open source components are adopted, while at the same time, the requirements for data security are getting stricter. So, and additionally, due to a new DevOps practices, which we discussed, and DevOps tools and the DevOps environment we discussed a few minutes ago, the development cycles are getting shorter. So that allows organizations to meet market demands and to deliver a great customer experience. But are we sure that our application security task is keeping up with these activities? And how is it possible to develop at the speed of business, whilst maintaining application security, especially for open source components. And that's why developers have basically a major key role in playing in balancing security with the need for rapid innovation.
Exactly. We have another very interesting fact that, when actually shifting the responsibility and the ownership to development, as you just mentioned, it's way easier for them to actually integrate security as part of the software pipeline. So things that would take like months or even years to security teams, like implementing security tests as part of CI/CD pipeline, or having a post-build step in Jenkins that checks for security issues. This would take to security teams, to design that and to implement that would take months. This is something that if you shift the responsibility to development teams, it will take maybe 20 story points in a 2-week sprint. So this is something that can happen a lot faster. And we definitely see it also in the statistics, and when meeting actual organizations, we see it on a daily basis.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the whole conversation around having developers a key role in securing applications and to achieve DevSecOps objectives is because the operational work of security testing should be moved from from security teams into the hands of the developers. And security should be everyone's job anyway in any organization. But shifting this into the hands of developers basically enable them for rapidly integrate the results of that testing into their code. And also don't forget that the whole purpose of DevOps philosophy is to reduce administrative burden of software development and get working code into production quickly. So when transitioning from DevOps to DevSecOps, security efforts can succeed by embracing this same philosophy. So we are embracing DevOps philosophy for the security purpose. So with the right training, the developers can basically embed testing and security at the earliest stage, or into the whole environment.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about the benefits of embedding the security in the earlier stages, right? Because we all know that fixing a quality bug in production costs way more than, just fixing it in planning or in coding. But in the security world, it's even more expensive because you are actually exposed to vulnerabilities if you deployed a security issue to production. So it's not only the actual cost that it costs the developer to redo the work and rethink, and maybe to the product to analyze, and to security teams. It's also the fact that you may have lost the confidence of a customer because you had a serious security issue. So here we can see, the cost, but what I want to say, it's not only about the actual cost in terms of money or dollars, it's also the cost in terms of, your customer's confidence. And this is one of the most important things for all of us, I think, in our organization.
Absolutely, that's a reputational risk, basically, because you may lose your reputation, your
Exactly.
your customers. But security and quality, both are serious threats which needs to be basically to address, because it's easy to detect defect, enhances it provide a process which is being easy to detect defects. It basically enhance quality and security, and that reduce cost and also improve the return of investment. And also you mentioned about reputation risk, which is really important, because your organization will be always an example. Look at British Airways, look at other cyber incidents we had, and the name of your organizations will be used as an example to for industry, and it's really important. There are ways we can do this quite easily by running the right change management, having the right assignment management, how we do escalation management, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, so I think this is one of the most important points. I mean, what is the actual cost and what is the actual benefit of actually implementing DevSecops? Because securing the pipeline using DevSecops is not only about helping you to actually reduce the risk. It also reduces the cost, as we just said, because there is no double work. I mean, if I develop something using a specific open source component, and then when it goes to production, my security person tells me, listen, this is not a good component, it has many vulnerabilities, and now you have to redo the entire work. So obviously, there is a lot of cost involved. Also, there is the speed of delivery, right? Because if we detect the issues as early as we can, maybe we didn't even implement, we didn't even start working on, sorry, the actual risky component. But also, one of the most important concepts is being secure by design. That actually gives us a lot of operational benefits versus, competitors in the market. And one of the most important concepts of DevSecops, of course, is open discussion. And one of the things that we always say about DevOps is that it's all about the culture of, having an open discussion, always improving and doing like small agile steps, and continuously improving. So this is also the idea with, the security world. It's exactly the same, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's spot on. The benefits are huge for organizations, and one of the other benefits of DevSecOps is how DevSecOps helps to simplify governance, because DevSecOps basically described as organizations' culture and practices, and in which organizations can bridge the gap between developers and security team and operation team. So when you mentioned about working together and an open discussion, that basically helps this bridge and improve process through this collaboration and agile workflows. And that's why it drives faster and more secure software delivery, because of this benefits brings from being open and openness. But don't forget that organizations are different, and if you want to, there is no uniform DevSecOps practice. So each organization needs to tailor its culture and its DevSecOps practice to its own unique process and products and security requirements.
Right. One of the things that I always say is that it's about identifying the process that you have in your existing organization, and then just implementing the security aspects into the existing flow. So we gave here like the small example of you're already using Jenkins, you have automated tests for functional tests. So incorporating the security test is a small step that has a lot of benefits. So it actually integrates with your existing workflow. So yeah, I definitely believe that it's all about, identifying the actual organization and the actual company, and then having the right tools to help that organization. So these are the business benefits, but we also have some operational benefits. So one of the most important things when starting to implement DevSecOps, and in general, when thinking about open source security, is keeping the versions up to date. So most open source vulnerabilities these days, I think that the statistic is like 95% of them already have a fix in a higher version, in a later version of the software. So all of the open source vulnerabilities out there, I mean, most of them already have a fix, and the only thing that we have to do as an organization is to upgrade to the latest version. So once your versions are up to date, there is very minimal security risk in terms of open source. And also, we already discussed the issue that there is nearly zero rework because the developer has already been, the development cycle is already secure right from the beginning. So we don't have to do the double work of fixing security issues. So it gives us, the clear benefit of identifying vulnerabilities very early in the code and not even seeing vulnerabilities in production. And we discussed DevOps as having iterative improvements. So it's all about, agility. It's not about implementing, this big word DevSecops in 1 month or even in 1 year. It's about starting small, starting in, small cycles that fits your organization and then iteratively improving them. So I think that, yeah, these are the most of the operational benefits that I can see here.
Yeah, and this is one of the quite hot topic discussion when people talk about open source security. And in here you can see you can make security works better in open source because you work with the open source community globally, and they can find the vulnerability much faster, and patch management can be done much faster. In order to achieve this, you have to have the right governance in place and the right open source management tooling in place to identify those vulnerabilities, quickly find the patches, and run the patch management. And you don't need to wait for Patch Tuesday or any day for your vendor comes with with recommendation of patching. You can patch instantly if you have the right governance in place.
Right, definitely. So patching is a very important aspect. And these are the actual tools that will sort of help us to adopt, for actual developers to adopt the DevSecops practices. And it's not an easy thing. I mean, developers, most of what they want to do is to complete the feature that they are currently working on and just move forward. I mean, most of the developers, if they're not measured and they're not aware of the security aspect, they will not voluntarily just go and fix security issues. It's not fun. It's not something that any developer would like to do as their hobby. So we definitely need to think of how we drive developers to adopt the security aspect.
Yeah, I mean, I can quote someone, but I can't remember who said this or where I read this. By fail fast, fail small, and fail forward. So that's basically for developers is it gives that right tooling and right environment for them to fail quite fast and then take things forward quite fast, and that's really important from a developer perspective when it comes to security.
Yeah, so I think that when it really comes to security, we mentioned it, but really native tools integration. I mean, developers are not looking for new tools for security specifically. So what we want to try and do as security teams, as managers, is to find the tools that they are already using and find the ways to highlight securities within them. So it can be the Jenkins, it can be GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket, and it can be the IDE, for example. So we want to highlight security issues in their existing environment and avoid context switching, of course.
And automation, which we will talk about automation further when we go down to other slides.
Yeah. So what we can really see is that in this slide, if you see our some of the DevSecops Insights article or survey that you, by the way, can find and download. Maybe we can put a link down. Is that we can definitely see that developers' adoption is not the top priority when choosing a security tool. I would claim that this should be a lot higher in our priorities when choosing the tool as security teams or even as development managers or managers in general. Because, you know, early detection and ease of integration are great and they're super important, but if no one is using the tool, they are worth nothing. So I would really claim that we need to put the ease of use for developers and the developers adoption a lot higher here on our list of priorities when choosing a tool.
Absolutely. I mean, we mentioned about automation, but automating work and providing easy to interpret results is really requiring here for the use of tools which is designed for the to fit into the DevSecops workflow. And don't forget, again, DevSecops is a partnership between software developers and cybersecurity professionals. And security professionals should be open-minded about the testing tools in their, environment. This may include potentially adopting new tools and that basically help achieve their security objectives in a more efficient way and integrated those into the DevOps lifecycle. So, this is, as we mentioned earlier, is all about collaboration and working different teams together and provide, a space which they can bring their ideas and they can work together and achieve the best results.
Yeah, which actually leads us to the second step, which is focusing on the actual features that drive the developers' adoption. And we can see that it's very different between security and developers. I mean, we can see that ease of integration is very important for security, whereas, easy to use for developers is also very important. So we really need to focus on what the developers actually care about and sort of find a balance between what developers care about and what security cares about.
Yeah, and production operation tools aim to streamline and automate the development, operations, and monitoring activities. So we need to provide this and select this on system functional, the requirements that for the function of our system, and the suitability for production environment and infrastructure. But at the same time, we need to make sure developers is our center of our attention. We want to make sure to enable them to do what they're supposed to do to develop faster and to develop quality code. And we need to make sure that everything we think about security and about tooling and automation is based on enabling and empowering developers.
Exactly. There is always this friction between security and sort of ease of use for developers. And I think here we're actually able to combine them quite easily. I mean, we can give more tools for developers that will drive security without actually complicating the life of the developers too much. And I think this is what we should really focus on. So really the right tools and sort of like the new generation of developers will have security in mind. And I think that if as a developer, you dealt with security and you had the right tools, it will be very weird or very even hard to go back. So if in one company you had the right tools for security, and then you come to a new company and there is no security in the responsibility of the developers, something will be really missing. And one of the most important things, of course, is robust tools that actually fit the developers' day-to-day workflows. And I think we discussed it quite a lot. So we need to choose the right technologies here, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
So the next point is really about training, and this is one that I specifically like because I think that there is not enough focus that we put on developers training in general, not even in the security space. Most companies will say that developers, they like what they do. Most developers just like to code. They do it also in their free time for, open source projects. And I think that most companies don't invest enough in development training. And I think that if we do invest in it and improve, the actual developers' app tech skills, developers are, I'm doing a sort of a generalization here, but developers like to learn, and security is something that is very, hot. A lot of organizations are very focused on security these days, and this is why we need to sort of give and empower developers to learn more about security. So it's about, sort of shifting left and highlighting those shift left practices. And what we need to focus on in this training is really how to bridge and how to give the culture of bridging between, the needs of the developers to the needs of the security teams and making them work together in a very efficient way. So really sort of prevent those security issues by actually teaching developers how to avoid them from the beginning, and not how to find them after you already deployed something to production. So I think this is one of the biggest points here in the entire slide deck.
And also the training could be quite different from one organization to the other organizations, because the way security treatment is going on, the way the culture sees security and deals with security, that the whole training and these awareness activities should be absolutely aligned to organizational overall objectives and organizational overall training techniques and training environment, which you cannot just set up a training for developers which is completely different from that the other trainings going on in organization itself. It's really important to be fit for the purpose, and that's really all. I can give you one example from our one of our clients. We had 30 minutes videos for awareness and as part of awareness program around open source, and we had 5 minutes short videos like a quick bits talk, and people seem quite like the 30 minutes rather than 5 minutes, which we were thinking 5 minutes is more appealable. So it all depends on the culture. I mean, one culture could be the other way around. The 5 minutes is more appealable than 30 minutes.
For sure, yeah. So, I mean, security is all about culture as everything else. And I think that really another thing that is more, regarding the organization's culture is picking the right person to apply the security the security teams or methods, because we can come from, as an outsider and tell them to implement security. But as long as there is no one specific champion for development teams to actually help them bridge the gap and bridge even the communication gap between security and development teams, it's really hard to do it as an outsider, even if you have all the right tools and all the right processes, and theoretically you have everything you need, even for this specific organization. Usually in most organizations, you have to have one champion that comes from the inside and knows exactly who they need to talk to in order to have that concept in place, and who exactly you need to convince in management in order to implement that tool. So I think it's all about the culture, but it's also about having the right person, the right AppSec person in place to implement the AppSec.
Because, in confirmation of what you said, educating developers and working cross-functional team and different teams together, it's developers cannot fix issues they don't understand. and also they must have enough knowledge of common security issues and how they might appear in their work. So they also need to understand what is the secure coding practice, in order for them to understand the common vulnerabilities. So there are this is the non-technical part of DevSecops, providing security to DevOps environment. It hugely depends on the culture, as we discussed, and that training, and how we run that piece of awareness and education for developers to understand it, and not them to bypass security. We don't want them to bypass security because they may not see security as something which they are conveniently can address and strongly to be address the issues around that. They need to know what are the problems and what the problem may lead to the consequences, and their role as a developer to deal with that.
Yeah, there is also always this built-in friction between security and between development, since they are not standardized on, the processes. The communication is usually problematic, and having this champion within the team can definitely help bridge the gap from our experience. So this is a very important point. And so we're towards concluding. So if you have any questions about anything we said or anything we didn't say, please ask. So what I really think the takeout from this presentation is, maybe one of the most important things are think how it looks in the eyes of the developers, and find small and applicable tools to actually try and convince the developers to use the security tools, because they will not shift and look at a big security dashboard or anything that will distract them from their day-to-day tools and their day-to-day work. So what we want to do is really equip the software development teams with the right tools and the right training to improve their AppSec skills, and also what we just discussed about the champion. So if you want to drive security within your organization, try to spot that specific person that can be your AppSec champion and can convince and sort of avoid the friction between the different teams and bridge the gap internally. Anything to add, Reza?
Yeah, you mentioned most important parts. I can add that it is really important for us to determine what needs to be secured, because that's really important to understand from an organizational perspective. and also maintaining security between services, creating a security culture, security, the whole organizations follow that culture, embrace that culture. And you mentioned about right tools, that's absolutely spot on. But one of my biggest and important suggestion is make sure and encourage developers to report. Make sure the communication between developers and other teams is always free of hassle. They can reach to people when they need when they need help. They can reach to AppSec champions. They can reach to infrastructure people and cybersecurity team. That's really important. Create an automated communication channels which they can get updated. They can connect to people and they can get help as easily as possible. Because everything we do in here, we want to empower developers. Don't forget communication and communication and communication.
Yeah, I guess this is the most important thing, not only in security, but in everything we do in life, communication.
Absolutely.
So thanks. And now we have some questions, I believe, Charlene.
Yes, we've gotten some questions in, but there is plenty of time for the question and answer period. So if you have a question for either Shiri or Reza, please go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel. Let's go ahead and dive into the ones we have so far. Here's the first one. What is the difference between DevOps and DevSecOps other than the security aspect? Also, with cloud platform usage, what are the tools available? That's a big one to start off with.
Yeah, so okay, I can take it. So the difference that I see between DevOps and DevSecOps is mostly around security, to be honest. I mean, it's about culture and it's about integrating the right tools, but the end goal at the end of the day is actually the security. I mean, we have different ways to do it depending on your organization, depending on the team size, depending on the size of the organization in general. But I think that most of the work will be regarding security. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's only for developers to deal with. It's not only the responsibility of the developers, because we have security teams that still have to say what the right policy is, investigate the security issues. I mean, it's up to the developers to actually detect and fix things, but security teams still need to facilitate the entire discussion. And regarding the tools available, so this is a very big question. And security is a very big world. We have, SAST and DAST, and we have network security, and we have, SCA for open source. So the tools available are depending on, the size of the team, the size of the company. But there are many tools out there, and I really encourage you to start. And maybe if it's a small team, start with some, open source tools. If it's a larger, enterprise, maybe you need some more robust tools. So it's really a matter of, your specific organization.
Yeah, if I add to that, in terms of the difference between DevSecOps or what DevSecOps is, you mentioned about security and how the culture can help the culture of in order to put developers at the center of the activities. Organizations when they implement DevOps, they should the reason they go into the DevOps or adopt DevOps is just because they want to do continuous and dynamic delivery, and having this continuous delivery, you would need security in place, because a compromised application can easily be replaced, by spinning up a new instance. So and also is also about how operation works, because whilst DevOps helps you to streamline operation and do the faster operation, security is enabler for that operation. Security shouldn't be seen as something which prevent to achieve what DevOps want to achieve. So is in one word maybe security, but the other word is in the other, looking at the other side is the whole compliance, the whole regulatory regime. When you want to comply and give the right assurance to your organizations, these activities is helping you for that specific result. So you're enabling specific activities for providing that level of compliance with regulations needed.
All right, great. Next question here. Do you see automated security and pen testing as part of the DevSecOps culture, or something that sits outside by a third-party specialist with remediation plans?
If I answer that, I really would like to see as part of DevSecOps activities as well as threat modeling. I don't know what Shiri thinks about this, but my heart is pen testing and threat modeling as part of SDLC process. It should be as part of, considered as part of DevSecOps. Again, this is really not really, but it can be a subjective question in respect to that, because organizations to organizations are different, and it's quite difficult to say, or from an outsider, if I go to an organization and say, oh, you need to bring this silo activity of pen testing from your vulnerability management team into DevSecOps, or the other way around. It's quite difficult, but if I was tasked to consider this as part of DevSecOps, I would definitely consider both threat modeling and penetration testing as part of DevSecOps.
I agree. I think that even if you have a third-party company that is specialized on, what they do is pen testing. Even if this is what you do, and this is a great practice, in my opinion, still the developers will have work fixing what they actually detected. And this is the situation in many organizations that I see. So definitely part of DevSecOps, even if it's a third-party vendor.
All right, great. We've gotten so many great questions, and so I'm just going to keep plowing right through them here. Are traditional software testing tools and processes like SAS, DAST, IAST, and SCA still relevant in DevSecOps?
Yes.
Yeah.
Short answer, yes.
They are relevant, and it's important to follow them, basically, because each of these methodology does different things for you. So whilst, for instance, SCA as software composition analysis provides you a really deep understanding and view of your components, because when it comes to open source, you've got dependencies, and dependencies got dependencies. So you've got directive dependencies, direct dependencies, and transitive dependencies. So the certain element, the certain methodology cannot deal with issues like dependency as one of the examples. So you need to enable your SCA capability for open source components to find out your dependencies, and even go further to specify, to find snippets, because again, that's one of the major headaches for organizations, because snippets can be lost in between all of these operations you run. What you're doing for open source components, for instance, IS cannot help you in that. So you use IS as interactive application security testing for its own purpose, and so on and so forth. So in my opinion, again, it is important to have all of this methodology defined in your company, but at the same time, it is important to understand where to put these methodologies, where to enable them. You need to have the right inventory in place. When we say about inventory, we talk about applications inventory. When we talk about critical application inventory, so running this inventory helps you to risk score your threats. So you see, your risk, because you see these applications with this specific threat and that risk score. And what should I do to address this risk? So I need to make sure that the right test goes for this piece of applications. And what is the right test? Right test based on the application itself. Where I want to run this test? Do I want to look at the components? Is that license management? Is any of these helping me for licenses? Because again, licenses is a complex issue when it comes to applications and open source code, because obviously 99% of applications using open source. Yes, short answer, yes.
Yes, DevSecops is more about the culture and the processes. And SAST and DAST and IAST and SCA are the tools. It's exactly like, DevOps is the culture and the processes, but, Kubernetes is a tool to implement that. So these are the tools to implement DevSecops.
Okay, all right, great. Quick time check. We're about 8 minutes to the top of the hour. We have about 5 minutes left for question and answer period. So I think we could do one, maybe two more. Enterprise culture implies employing the entire security team to cover security subjects, including validation of open source tools in terms of compliancy. How does this differ from the SecOps paradigm?
Okay, so definitely when you're in an enterprise organization, security is very different from a startup or a small medium company. But still, when you have the large security team, you still need to validate open source components. The difference is that you cannot have one centralized security team to validate all of the components, because then it just becomes a bottleneck. So this team will be very busy and will not let the developers focus on what they do best, which is developing new software, because they will need to wait to that security team to actually validate and approve the software. So this may work in a small organization because you have a few developers and the larger security team, maybe. But in an enterprise organization, this method it wouldn't keep up with the pace. So what DevSecOps is all about is giving the right tools for security to decide whether a specific component can be validated. And it's not about shifting the full responsibility to the developers. So security team can still say what is the policy and have sort of rules for when do we approve a certain component and when not. But it cannot be the gatekeeper or the bottleneck for this in enterprise team, because it just wouldn't work.
All right.
Yep.
All right. Go ahead, Reza. If you have any comments, you can go ahead and make them.
No, I think Shiri fully responded. That's basically it's again. I have to emphasize on that. From an organizational perspective, organization to organization is different, and don't forget that. That's the important factor when it comes to whether you want to enable SecOps or enable DevSecOps for security activities.
All right, All right, great. Let's try and do one more, and then we'll close it out. What are the recommendations? Any recommendations on monitoring and detecting vulnerabilities with an open source tool stack?
If I may, I have to say, make sure you two things needs to be done in that respect. First, make sure you have the right policy and guidelines in place. Make sure you have the consent of your stakeholders in organizations in order for them to understand security vulnerability and their implications. Make sure the tooling you put in place is the tool which is functioning for your organization's culture in terms of the developers, and is the right tool for developers. It is important make the right open source management tool in place for a quick response to vulnerability management, and obviously connect to the right database and have the right database in place to pick up the vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that the specific tool is less relevant as long as you have the right guidelines and the right processes in place.
All right, makes total sense. Okay, well, we are about 4 minutes to the top of the hour, so unfortunately that is all the time we have for questions. I think we got to all the questions, but if we didn't, I apologize. Please know that the folks at WhiteSource will be getting a copy of all of the questions that came in, and I'm sure they'll be more than happy to follow up with you offline and get your question answered. Do want to also remind the audience that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of the presentation, or if you just want to watch it again, you'll have the opportunity to do so. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And the webinar is also going to be living on the devops.com website. So you can always go look for it there. Just go to devops.com/webinars, look in the on demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. All right, I did mention at the top of the hour, we'd be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get that done. Our first winner today is Charles W. Congratulations, Charles. Our second winner today is Dace N. Congratulations, Dace. Our third winner today is James N. Congratulations, James. And our fourth and final winner today is Sean W. Congratulations, Sean. That's S-E-A-N. We'll be following up with all 4 of you by email to get your Amazon gift card over to you. So please check your inbox. If you don't see it in your inbox, check your spam filter. Shiri and Reza, thank you. Great presentation as always. WhiteSource always does such a great job. So I really appreciate your time and your expertise as always. Thanks again.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I also want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm signing off. Have a great day, everybody, and please stay safe.